We're now joined from Buckinghamshire by his main rival, the man who is currently in number 11, the Conservative Chancellor Sajid Javid. Thank you for being on the programme today. You're going to be laying out your manifesto later. What should we expect from it?
Well, I'm very excited about the launch, and what you'll see is that we're going to get Brexit done. We're going to unleash the potential of our whole country, and we'll be setting out in some detail about how we are the only party that will be able to deliver Brexit with a deal within weeks of taking office. We're going to start that process before Christmas, certainly completed by the end of January, but it will then give us the opportunity to really focus on what I call the people's priorities. More focus on the NHS, on our great schools, and on tackling crime with 20,000 more police officers.
You're also promising this idea of a triple tax lock, a promise not to increase income tax,
right,
national insurance or VAT. And yet you're planning to spend billions of pounds more on some of those things that you just mentioned in that answer. You're the Chancellor. How on earth do these sums add up?
Well, we're very clear. We want to help people with the cost of living wherever we can. So earlier this week, we set out our plans to cut taxes, to cut national insurance for 31 million people, helping the lowest paid the most. And well, if I answer the question about the tax lock, and I'll show you exactly how it adds up. We are also announcing today this, as you say, the triple tax lock, which is our commitment, giving more financial security to hard-working people, that under a Conservative majority government, the rates of tax and the three biggest taxes, national insurance, income tax and VAT, will not rise. And they can be absolutely certain of that. And of course, contrast that to Jeremy Corbyn's plans of a tax rise of around £2,400 per person. It's a huge difference in our approach to helping hard-working people. In terms of the numbers, how do they add up? I'm sorry?
2,400 per person?
That's Labour's plans. Labour's plans for a tax increase of £2,400
Well, we've
per
just heard
person
Labour's plans. That's not what John McDonnell was
on
telling
average.
me.
So in terms of our plans, in terms of, you asked me how do they add up, we will set out today, alongside our manifesto, published at exactly the same time, a very detailed costings document. It will take every additional cost that's in our manifesto, every single thing, whether it's tax or anything else, and we will set out exactly how we're going to fund it for the lifetime of the Parliament. It will in fact be the most detailed, most transparent costings that has ever been published in British electoral history by any party, and everyone will be able to see that for themselves.
OK, well, we'll look forward to pouring through the detail a little later today when that is released. We know that you're planning to borrow more because you told us. You said that you're happy to borrow an extra £20 billion a year. Now, you, of course, worked closely with George Osborne in the Treasury when it was all about deficit reduction, it was all about belt tightening, it was all about balancing the books. Now you're about to turn on the spending taps, now you're about to borrow billions of pounds more. I mean, are you really comfortable with this? Like, people who have been suffering for 10 years through austerity are going to be thinking, what was the point of that if the deficit's just going to start merrily ticking back up again?
Look, we've had, in the last 10 years, we've had a real decade of recovery. And that has meant that we've had to, of course, try to balance the nation's books, and that's exactly what we've been doing. Because I think everyone's understood when you're living beyond your means, when you're borrowing in an irresponsible way, which is exactly what the last government was doing, the last Labour government, then we've got to move forward, balance the books, but also do what we can to get the economy going and support that dynamic, free enterprise economy. It's as a result of those actions that we've taken. Today, we've got strong economic fundamentals. We've got more people employed than ever before. We've got an unemployment rate at a 44-year low. But because the economy is strong, we can afford, and as we've set this out in very clear, what we call fiscal rules, we will balance day-to-day spending, and we can still afford to borrow up to a limit for investment in economic infrastructure to make improvements, especially in productivity in our country. So investment in road, in rail, in fibre optic connections. We're announcing today, for example, a £2 billion pothole filling programme. These are the kind of things that we can do to have that infrastructure revolution. And very importantly, and this is a huge distinction between us and Labour, we are still clear that even with our programme for investment, that debt will be lower at the end of this Parliament than at the start of Parliament. With Labour, they're plans for 1.2 trillion, debt will be absolutely, utterly out of control.
I just want to come back on some of the points you were making about the economy being in a strong state at the minute, which allows you to do this, to loosen the purse strings. Moody's, one of the world's big credit ratings agencies, has just downgraded Britain because it's worried about the economic future. Last month, the government had its highest October budget deficit in 5 years. Debt is £1.8 trillion. I mean, people will be looking at this, and this was before the election spending pledges that everyone is talking about, and thinking, what was the point of austerity?
Well, so you mentioned the credit rating agency. I mean, first of all, the main reason they gave was the uncertainty and the paralysis in our parliament. So one of the best things that we can do for our country to move the economy forward is to remove that uncertainty with our Brexit deal, which, as I say, can happen within months. And secondly, when you look at the nation's finances, we are in a strong position to invest more, but as long as we take a prudent approach and keep day-to-day spending under control. We've done that. Now, with Labour, and you just had John McDonnell on, they haven't even done a proper costings document at all. Even after publishing their manifesto, they're throwing out new policies like confetti with billions of consequential costs. And it would show you that with Labour, your spending, borrowing and debt will be absolutely out of control. You know, every Labour government has left our country with an economic crisis. With this lot, it won't take years, as a Labour government normally does, to have that crisis. They'll do it within months. If Jeremy Corbyn is standing outside Downing Street, you imagine the nightmare on Friday the 13th, waking up to that, there will be a crisis by Christmas.
Well, let's talk about your own policy, shall we? I know it's in election mode. We're all keen to attack the other parties. But if you look at Labour's manifesto, you might not like what's in it, but it is a radical programme for change. And I have to say, if you look at the Conservative Party manifesto, some people will be left wondering, what is it that the Conservative Party actually stands for? Do you stand for anything more than basically just spending a little more but a bit less than Labour, borrowing more but a little bit less than Labour? Where is the radical vision for change in this manifesto?
Well, you mentioned Labour's is radical. It's radical for sure. You're radical in being absolutely, utterly irresponsible with the nation and our future. And
so what's the Conservative Party stand for?
Our manifesto. Absolutely. So you'll see our manifesto in detail in a few hours from now. But you'll see, first and foremost, the reason we're having this election is because we need to move on and get Brexit done. And we'll set out our plans for that whilst maintaining a close economic relationship with our European friends. And I think people want to see us move ahead with that. We'll be focusing on those things that really matter to people on the doorstep. Our great NHS, making sure we can fund it properly with an extra £34 billion a year. We're going to provide £14 billion over the next 3 years for our schools, 20,000 more police officers, more focus on childcare, a new national skills fund. We're announcing today £3 billion for individuals and small businesses to retrain people. You're abolishing hospital car parking charges for most people, and also our green revolution. It will be the most green manifesto any party has ever published, with a £6 billion fund, for example, for homes, especially 2 million social homes, to make sure they're properly insulated and they're set for the future.
Because the Conservative Party has always, in many people's minds, stood for low taxes. You've described yourself previously as a low tax guy. You're the kind of person who has a picture of Margaret Thatcher on your wall. And you said at Conservative conference that a cut to inheritance tax is on your mind. Is it still on your mind?
Well, why don't you wait and see what's the detail in the manifesto in terms of big tax changes? We've already said. We've already set out some of our big tax changes, and our tax changes are absolutely focused on the lowest paid, and that's why we focused on national insurance, with our ambition to get it to £12,500 in terms of the threshold, meaning a tax cut of almost £500 for hard-working people.
Would you like stamp duty to come down?
I'm not going to set out a future budget right now. Should we be lucky enough to win this election, then I will have my first budget, and I will certainly talk about other taxes at that time.
And you want, so it's interesting you talk about other taxes. You are keen then to prioritise cutting taxes in the future if you manage to stay in your job after this election?
We will cut taxes whenever we can afford it. whenever it's prudent for the country. And I think we've shown that in the last 10 years, how we can both cut taxes and invest in great public services. And the reason we're able to do that as a country is hugely important. And people really do understand this when you talk about it. It's because we have a strong economy. It's a strong economy, a dynamic free market economy that backs business that does this. You know, again, with Labour's plans, they have planned for the biggest tax increase ever, the most punitive tax regime for corporates. That's not my view. That's the view of the IFS.
Now, let's just talk about Brexit quickly, because, of course, one of the first things you'll do, as you've already told us, if you manage to win the election, is to try and push that withdrawal agreement through before Christmas. Now, your deputy, Rishi Sunak, has said that no-deal planning would resume after the election if the Conservatives win. So is no deal back on the table?
Well, look, the only risk of no deal is if there's not a Conservative majority. I think that's self-evident. You know, if we have a majority, we've got a deal, it's ready to go, literally ready to go, and we'll bring it back, as we say today, before Christmas. It'll be done by January, and then there is no prospect of no deal. But if we don't win, if there is a Labour victory, a Corbyn-Sturgeon alliance, or a hung parliament, the risk of a no deal is back, and the country doesn't want to see that. We've been through that, and as a country we want to move on with a deal that's good for Britain, it's good for our European friends, and we can then focus on so much else.
I mean, you say that the risk of no deal would go if that goes through. We may be in a slightly different no deal scenario, though, a no trade deal scenario, perhaps, because, of course, you've set a very tight deadline if you win the election to negotiate a new trade deal with the EU. If that doesn't materialise, maybe are you going to be setting aside some money to try and mitigate the effects of that? The new no-deal planning?
Look, I'm very confident that if we get a Conservative majority, we'll get our deal through by the end of January. I'm absolutely certain of that. And I'm very confident that in the time that we've set, that we will be able to agree on new economic partnership. The principles have already been agreed with the EU. We've already started a lot of the work. Obviously, it's on hold now because of the election. But if we are re-elected, we'll get back to that work and we can get that deal done certainly by the end of next year. Of that, I have no doubt.
Will any money be set aside to mitigate if you don't manage to get that deal through?
Well, we will, the future economic partnership, we will, if we have a Conservative majority, I'm confident we will get that through. I think most of the work has already been done. We already start from a position where the EU and the UK is aligned. We've agreed on all the key principles. And let's remember, you know, people about just over 100 days ago, they said you wouldn't be able to reopen the withdrawal agreement, you wouldn't be able to remove the backstop, you wouldn't be able to get a new agreement, and they were wrong, wrong, wrong. And those that say you're not going to be able to do it, they're just scaremongering, and we need to move on, deliver Brexit, and we're the only party that can do that.
OK, now, historically, the relationship between a Prime Minister and a Chancellor has always been a little bit frosty, a bit strained at times. There has been rumours of rifts between you and Boris Johnson. So were you a little bit relieved when he said that he would keep you on as Chancellor after the election if he wins?
Well, first of all, we have an absolutely fantastic relationship, and we've had that for many, many years, and you know, that's not going to change. And you know, I wasn't expecting to say what he said. He was asked a question, and he gave an honest answer, and I love the answer.
So a little bit relieved then.
It was a great answer.
OK, Sajid Javid, thank you very much for coming on the programme
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. Thank you.